So today and this morning, I was thinking about stress, and not just in the abstract sense, but thinking about stress that sort of just sits there in the background, ambient stress, if you want to call it that. But it sits there quietly in the background, the kind where you're sort of technically fine, but, functioning. Getting things done, but there's this low grade pressure that maybe it's building, but it's not going away. And I remembered something that Jeff Bezos has said many times, and I want to apply that more and more to my work, and I want to share that. So I don't know the exact quote, but the idea behind it is very, very important. So I went back, looked at it more deeply. When Bezos talked about this idea that stress, it doesn't come from hard work, grinding away at projects, but it comes from not doing something that you know that you should be doing. If that's on your mind and you feel like you know that there's something that you should be doing but you're not doing it, that is where real stress comes from, according to Jeff Bezos. So from avoiding a decision, avoiding a conversation, avoiding a next step that you have control over. It's not something that's out of your hands, but if it's something that you are in charge of, that you're supposed to be doing, that is a major source of stress. And avoiding that problem creates it for you. So taking care of whatever specific thing might be on your mind can almost immediately relieve that stress. That idea hit me because when I think back on the moments where I was the most stressed in recent months, it's usually because, I wasn't overwhelmed. There wasn't a general sense of being overwhelmed, but there was always something specific, or maybe a couple of specific things that were circling around in my mind that I had not touched yet, and that were there, that were present. And I'm sure you can relate to this if it comes to deadlines or something that is due by a certain time. You have a couple of hours to do something. And what's interesting about that stress is that it doesn't always show up as panic or anxiety. Sometimes it's distraction or just irritability and that feeling that you can't quite focus, even though technically nothing might be wrong. So it's like your mind is holding on to something that's unfinished and refuses to let go and forget it. So this idea is really pointing to the fact that stress can be a signal, and it's almost like a warning light, on a car, not necessarily telling you that you're failing or that you can't handle something. It's just telling you that something is unresolved and some action needs to be taken somewhere, within your circle, within your awareness. And the longer you ignore it, the louder it will get. And what makes that tricky is that, we don't usually avoid things because they're hard in a technical sense. They're too difficult for us, but we avoid them because they're uncomfortable. There's an emotional attachment to it. And I'm sure you can think of examples, but for me, it might be a difficult phone call. It might be, where you don't know how the other person will react to something. And it could be an email that you have to send that might trigger conflict. And it could be a decision, that forces you to commit to a certain path, or to back away from a different path and change course on something. So instead of doing whatever thing that is, we stay busy. We tell ourselves that, we need to go research some more or be productive on something else when we're not really being productive. We plan, we organize, we think about the problem from different angles, except the one that really requires us to take action and move and get rid of that problem. move it off your plate. So all the while, the stress builds and it stays. And at least what I've found helpful about this idea is that it changes the question that I ask myself. You know, instead of asking, how do I calm down? Why do I feel like this? I'll ask something a whole lot more direct. What am I not doing right now? What is the thing that is specifically bothering me right now? And the answer is always or often very clear in that moment. If there's a very specific task I need to get done because a person is about to message me or call me wondering where this is at. So the difficulty isn't figuring out what that task is. The difficulty might be in that task itself, but avoidance really just makes it worse. So, it could be a decision that I've been delaying, because I don't want to deal with the consequences yet. And the moment I identify it clearly, it shifts. The stress becomes concrete. It's no longer this vague cloud of stress. It has a shape. I know how to shape the stress and to see and visualize the stress because the task isn't done yet, but at least I've identified it. So there's something important here about control, and it doesn't apply to everything. There are situations where stress is unavoidable in life. People deal with grief and health issues and real problems that are outside of your influence. And that's a different category of stress. Here we're talking about the kind of stress where action exists, where there is something that you can do, even if it's a small thing, to get rid of it. And the surprising part really is that your nervous system doesn't really seem to care whether you solve a problem entirely or, completely make a problem go away. It just wants to know that you have started to tackle it. Once you feel on track, it can really, really almost get rid of that stress. And, psychologists talk a lot about how unfinished tasks will linger in your mind. Once something is open, your brain keeps revisiting it. Even if it's not conscious at your forefront, at the forefront of what you're thinking about, your mind remembers and keeps track of many, many different things. So when you take the first real step on something specific that's bothering you, it's a physical and observable reaction that takes place in your brain where you relax to a good degree. It stops sounding an alarm, a stress alarm. So that's why I think intention isn't enough. It's telling yourself, I'll deal with it later. It's, maybe I can do this, maybe I can do this other thing, or, I have to deal with this other thing as well. Jumping at the next easier problem to deal with. That doesn't make your stress go away. Facing the problem that is causing you stress and at least creating an outline for what your next specific action will be will reduce that stress in whatever situation you're dealing with. Even making the perfect plan will not help you. That's still avoidance. What helps is movement. The first step doesn't have to be this major breakthrough. It works best when something is very, very small, because at least that's progress and it's movement towards accomplishing something. So, open a document. Take the first step to open the email that you have to send. Outline what you have to talk about in a difficult phone call. Write one rough paragraph of whatever it is that you're dealing with. Book the appointment that you're avoiding. Ask the tough question that you have to ask. Put a time on the calendar, whatever it is that you have to deal with that you're avoiding that's causing you stress. So I've noticed that the moment that I do a small thing that is lingering, it makes a huge difference emotionally and doesn't make the problem go away completely, but the stress becomes a whole lot lower, and it feels contained and it feels like it's being handled, instead of just lurking there and, existing, the stress, uh, we tackle it. So there's another part of this that matters. Sometimes you don't resolve the issue right away, and that's okay. But even then, you can still reduce stress by scheduling the next action clearly. Not I'll get to it, but tomorrow at 9:30 I'll do this, or Friday afternoon I'm going to spend 30 minutes on this thing. Now it has a place, it stops floating around in your head. And what I like about this idea is that it's grounded. It doesn't ask you to eliminate stress entirely or just to calm down and take a moment to relax about something. But this specific technique talks about reducing stress by just accomplishing even the smallest thing that you can within a specific task. So I've spoken previously about taking short breaks. That's extremely important. But within those other 50 minutes or 55 minutes that you take within the hour where you are taking action, it's important to at least take some incremental steps to reduce the stress that exists, because you don't want to reach that breaking point or boiling point where your brain is just overwhelmed, and you're just ready to collapse, basically mentally. So stress doesn't want to be muted. It can't be muted effectively. Stress needs to be listened to. And what I find, when I feel that pressure now, I'll try to ask myself, if I were being completely honest with myself, what is the thing at hand that I'm avoiding? What is the exact thing right now that I'm avoiding that's giving me the stress? And when I try to do just one little thing in that direction, not perfectly, but deliberately, it makes a massive difference. So I hope that's helpful to somebody out there. Have an amazing day.